Today is the 31st of October, Halloween, and look what I found. Now, normally I would sit on a rock like this, on a stone like this, and have a cup of tea and a sandwich. But even though I'm not really a superstitious person, today, Halloween, I think I'll find somewhere else to sit. Do you know what this is? This stone? This is Halloween, but for real. I want you to try and forget all the films and TV programs which portray Halloween as being a time for parties and costumes and trick-or-treats and reading funny ghost stories. Try and remember your history lessons from school. And if you can, you'll know that All Hallows Eve was never meant to be fun. And this place and that stone gives us a glimpse of how we once understood life and death and the afterlife. This particular track that I'm walking along on my own on Halloween is known as a corpse road. And that stone is a corpse stone. Oh, if English isn't your first language, a corpse is, it's the body of a dead person. In medieval England, corpse roads were the paths and tracks used for carrying the dead to a churchyard for burial. And along these routes, corpse stones, they were placed at regular intervals. And there used to be lots of corpse roads all over England. If a person died in a village without his own church, then the family would pick the body up and they would carry it along this corpse road to the nearest churchyard. Over time, these pathways became dedicated solely for this purpose, as people believed it was improper to use them for anything else. But as you can imagine, carrying a heavy dead body over the moors, it's difficult and hard work. So corpse stones, these things, they were placed along the route to give the carriers somewhere to put the body while they took a rest. Hence the name, corpse stone. In this area, the village of Marset didn't have its own church. So this corpse road winds up through the hills towards the village of Spalding Busk, which did have a small church and, more importantly, it had a churchyard. In medieval society, there were very strong social, religious and cultural reasons for ensuring that the deceased were laid to rest in consecrated ground. Burying someone in a churchyard meant that their soul could rest in peace while they waited for the resurrection. Being buried anywhere else was considered tragic, or even as punishment for some perceived moral failing. The idea of giving somebody a proper burial was so important that corpse roads connected even the most remote communities, to consecrated churchyards. This spared the deceased person from being buried in the wild or unblessed ground. In medieval England, beliefs in witchcraft and sorcery, they weren't just superstitions. They were widely accepted as being absolutely true. So without the protection of the church, people feared that the souls of the buried outside, people buried outside consecrated ground, they could become restless spirits and they would wander the earth forever. So corpse roads, by the way, were never used on All Hallows Eve, like today, as everybody knew that on that day, spirits roamed the earth. And they would see anybody who had recently died as one of their own. And they would attempt to rescue the new spirit, to prevent it from being taken to consecrated ground. And in this case, the newly departed person would roam the corpse road on All Hallows Eve for eternity. All Hallows Eve, by the way, is today. For isolated villages like Marset without their own burial grounds, the funeral procession would pass along the corpse road, and it became a symbolic way of returning the deceased back to the community. Along the way, locals would sometimes gather around the stones, to pay their last respects before the body was laid to rest in the churchyard. Now, I think maybe looking back at this from a modern perspective, this all might seem a little strange. But in medieval times, if somebody couldn't be buried in consecrated ground, it was a serious matter. As it often led the people to believe that the person might have lived in a way which was morally or religiously unacceptable. And families dreaded this. They feared that the other villagers would interpret this as a sign of sin or disgrace on the remaining family. And that's why these tracks were used. and, and why I'm not going to sit on that rock and have a cup of tea on, on my own, on a corpse road, on Halloween. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, route plans. Let's get back to route plans. Let's stay focused.